Um, so I'm still reeling from something I heard on a podcast earlier today, which was What's Essential with Greg McKeown. He's the author of Essentialism, so he has a lot of really good stuff to say too. But so he had a guest, and the guest was talking about life extension technology. That is to say, technologically extending beyond the natural, currently achievable life. So, talking about that, and he started by saying he's pro that. He wrote a book about it. I don't recall the man's name right now off the top of my head, but so he was talking about some of the benefits, which seemed kind of self-evident to me, but yeah. So he mentioned things that would be good about it, and then the host said, "Well, that's but of course there's downsides too. You're just saying the upside outweighs the downside." And I thought, what downside? And then he cited a poll. Apparently this is actually a controversial issue. There was some poll taken. I don't know what exact demographic. It was Americans, some set of Americans that was a representative sample. Would you want to take a life extending technology that would extend your life to 150 or 200 years? And I'm still shocked by the percentage that said no.
Really?
It was more than 60% said.
Of Americans?
Said no. Yeah. According to what I said on the podcast. I mean, I want to look it up and see if there's some details to parse out. They were not bringing it up in the context of trying to be sensational. They were bringing it up in the context of, yeah, you got a tough road ahead of you if you want to sell people on this technology.
And what did the guy who was defending life extension say in response?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are against it. There are downsides, like, for example, inequality.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yes, so this is I mean, it's so evil. It's hard to even respond. So in 2002, I think, or three, George Bush commissioned a study. He had a bioethics panel assembled and commissioned a study to look into life extension and to make recommendations about it. About, is it good? Is it bad? What's going on? And it was headed by, God, what is the guy's name? Kessler. I don't know if it was Kessler. Anyway, I don't want to say the wrong name because I'm going to say horrible things about him, so I don't want to attribute it. Adam probably knows who I'm talking about. But anyway, this guy headed it up. He's a well-known conservative. He works at the American Enterprise Institute. And the committee came back and said, life extension.
Leon Cass.
Leon Cass.
And he is a fellow, not a worker at the American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah. So even worse, he's a well-regarded intellectual at the American Enterprise Institute. Leon Cass, one of the people I hate the most in the world. I've never met him. He came back and he said, no, life extension is not good. There are real problems with it. And they literally listed some of the problems that would happen, what are we going to do with Social Security? Like people retired at 65 and now they're going to live to be 150. How it's going to go bankrupt. How are we going to fund Social Security? Right. I mean, they couldn't even imagine the idea of maybe they wouldn't retire at 65. Maybe,
Right.
What are people going to do? I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to be bored to hell. They're not going to have anything productive to do because they retired. So the whole social society would fragment because our societies are built on the family nucleus. Grandparents, parents, children. That's the family nucleus. It's a limited unit. It's got a certain size. It's worked for us since the beginning of time. We've always had it. It works. Family it's the most important thing in the world. If you started to have great, great, great grandchildren, it's a disaster. Everything would fall apart. You know, you couldn't handle it. The unit would grow too big, and you know, the family would fall apart. It would disintegrate completely. And then the one I found, the funniest. Yeah.
There is something very interesting about that report, which is that it imposed a so-called bioethics review on all medical research in the United States. And it declared as a principle that old age is not a disease, and therefore medical research on curing old age is prohibited, because you are only permitted to do medical research to cure diseases. And since old age is not a disease, medical research on life extension is prohibited in the United States.
Well, it's not that it's prohibited. It's that the government won't fund it, one, which is, and the government funds a lot of the basic research out there. And two, it's unlikely that the FDA would ever approve a treatment or a drug, if it's within the boundaries of what the FDA approves, that was focused on life extension. And indeed, I've talked to a lot of venture capitalists over the years, because I was involved in a life extension company. I was on the board of a life extension company for a while. And the venture capitalists wouldn't fund, because part of their argument was, if you have real IP, if you have real intellectual property, and you have something new, the FDA is not going to approve it. And if it's just a bunch of vitamins, you've got no competitive advantage. Anybody can make it. So there's no profit in it. So they if you think about, you know, long term, what would the venture capitalists would love to invest in life extension, because it's one of the most profitable businesses possible to man. I mean, we would pay a fortune to be able to live longer, but they literally will not invest in it, or very few of them. Peter Thiel will, because he's kind of a little bit of a maverick. A lot of very wealthy billionaires will do it privately. They'll invest in research privately, but not through a fund, because they know they can't get a return on it because the FDA won't approve it. Shahzad reminded me of one of the things that were in the report. One of the dangers of life extension is, and this relates to family and the importance of family, is that, and I often mention this and joke about this, is the rate of divorce will go up. I mean, I mean, literally, this is what was said. I read this paragraph and I was like, no. I mean, you could probably tolerate a spouse for 50 years, but 100 with the same spouse, that's impossible. Now, even if that were true,
who
who
cares?
the hell cares?
Two marriages. You could have two full
Fine,
happy.
what difference does it make?
People do it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly sick. And this is from conservatives.
Yeah.
And the left is the same way, because the left's attitude is, you live longer, more people on planet Earth, more resources being used, more carbon emissions, more destroying the environment. So they each have their God, and their God says, you know, you should only live 80 years or whatever, and that's it. And neither one is willing to side with another God. I mean, what is one of the reasons that I did not vote? No, it's one of the reasons I voted for John Kerry in 2004. I mean, not the only reason, but one of them. I hated Bush so much that this would come out of the Bush administration was so sickening that that something like this would, beyond 9/11 and what he did around 9/11, that I just couldn't stand for it. Just couldn't stand for it. So yes, there is both on the right and on the left, there are people, and religious people, serious about being against life extension.
What shocks me the non-ideological people. I've heard someone say it when I was in my early 20s at a party, we were talking about it, and I was saying how much I hope that by the time I get older, there's some kind of technology so I can live another 100 years or something. And another woman there at the party said, "Oh, not me. 75 years is enough."
Well, but that tells you a lot about their attitude towards life, right? And this is what's sad about the poll you mentioned. It really means that they hate their life. They're not enjoying it. They're not happy. They want it over. They don't have the balls to actually commit suicide. And the fact that 60% of Americans would say this just suggests the level of unhappiness, the level of misery, the level of dissatisfaction with life, and you can see it in the way they vote politically, in their attitude, in a lot of these things. People are unhappy, and they're unhappy because they don't have the proper guiding philosophy. And as a consequence, one of my favorite characters in I guess you can call it literature is Lazarus in Robert Heinlein's science fiction writing. I don't know if you've ever read Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. I read it. Granted, I read it in my 20s. I don't know how much I'd like it today, but in my 20s, I thought it was I loved that book. It was a fantastic book. It doesn't really have a plot because it's a bunch of vignettes, but it's about this guy who lives basically forever. And yeah, he marries lots and lots of times, partially because the women age and he doesn't. He stays young, which is a problem. But just this idea of him getting the span of history and seeing all these changes and living through it all and having all these adventures and going to different planets and wow, I mean, that sounds like so much fun. Why would anybody want to give that up? I mean, that's exactly what you need. So yes, I want to live to be 20,000. So
yes,
I'll take 150 as a compromise, but 20,000 is the goal.
Or more,
Yes.
Just, I can't understand someone who just would say, I'd rather not exist just because I'm bored.
They're bored and they're unhappy. They're unhappy.
Yeah.
Life is a struggle. Life is suffering. This is what made what's his name? Peterson so successful, telling people how hard life is, because that's how they experience it. They experience it as a bad thing, right? And the book, somebody asked what the name of the book was. The book was Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. Time Enough for Love. I think that's right. Time Enough for Love by Robert Heinlein. It might be my favorite Heinlein book of all the Heinlein's books. I actually think it's better than The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is the one that libertarians all love. And The Moon is a Harsh Mistress actually has a Randian in it. So it has an objectivist character in the book, which is interesting because Heinlein was influenced by Ayn Rand and obviously knew of Ayn Rand. You could tell different influences in his writing. All right.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it Objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it, but at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrooksShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.